Great, folks. We're going to give people just about 60 seconds to trickle in here. I know we're going to start at the top of the hour. I know everybody's got busy schedules, so we will honor your time and the window that we committed to. So we'll just give people about a minute here to filter in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. As promised, we are going to go ahead and get started here. We see people still trickling in, but let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome to today's webinar, Digital Project Delivery for Healthcare Capital Programs. I will be your host for today's webinar. My name is Evan Hill. I am a product marketing manager on the eBuilder and Trimble team. If you have attended any of our webinars in the past, I am probably a familiar face. Hopefully you're not sick of my voice just yet, but we've got a really solid, exciting, insightful speaker today in Guillermo Ramos from BayCare Health System, who is going to talk all about the digital revolution that is hitting capital programs across the country and all these different verticals, all these different industries, and what that means for revolutionizing your healthcare capital program. So before we get started, I am actually going to cover a couple of quick administrative items here. First of all, this is meant to be a little bit of a hybrid format. We're going to have a conversational discussion for the next 30 to 40 minutes is what we're going to target. And then we will leave room for Q&A at the end. So my request to you is that as we talk about these things, as questions come up, if you want to dig into something that Guillermo or I said, feel free to drop it into the question and comments tab on the right side of your screen. You should see a chat bar. Or I apologize, I misspoke, a Q&A bar that you're going to insert your questions into, and we will collect those at the end of the webinar and rattle off as many as we can. If we don't get through all of them, we will follow up over email with answers from our panelists. Second thing is, we know people are busy and sometimes you have to jump last second. No worries at all. This webinar will be recorded, so it will be available after the fact for your consumption. It will also be on the eBuilder website. And then finally, we will send an email post webinar completion, just with a survey asking for your feedback, your preferences, future topics you would like us to plan and talk about and focus on. That would be great. So with that said, those are our administrative items we needed to handle to kick us off today. We are going to go ahead and actually introduce our speaker. So you've got this wonderful portrait of him on your screen. I introduced him a little bit earlier, and I'm going to stop talking here in a second, but Guillermo Ramos is our Director of Facilities Design and Construction for BayCare Health Systems. And I'm not going to read off everything on the screen here. I'm actually going to let him speak it in his own words. So Guillermo, I'll hand it off to you. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your career background, your career context, and what ultimately led you into your role today?
Sure. Thank you, Evan, for inviting me. This is a great opportunity for me to share with other owners of my experience with as far as implementing a information system. And so a little bit about my background. My background is I'm a construction manager, graduated from Florida International University. I've been working for the owner, directly for the owner since 1992. Spent about 13 years at University of Miami Hospital. I was a facilities director there for a while. Before that, I was a project manager. Worked 5 years at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Miami Beach, Florida. Spent 7 years in Dallas working for UT Southwestern. Had some experience over at Charleston and also at North Carolina. And I've been here for the past 6 years. Great group, great organization, and appreciate the opportunity, Evan.
Yeah, no, that's great. Guillermo is widely respected in the industry, so he may be a familiar name. You may have even worked with him. We've seen some folks pipe in on the chat on that. So Guillermo's LinkedIn will be available. It's linked there at the bottom, and we will provide it at the conclusion as well. So let's go ahead and get started today with just a rough agenda of what we plan to cover. 4 main topics for today, excuse me. So the first one is, we know capital programs are complex. They involve typically thousands, can be thousands of users internally, externally, contractors, boards, project managers, executive directors, subcontractors, financial staff. It's a very complex delivery. So what we're going to talk about is what those pains look like pre-digital transformation. We're going to cover what selecting a digital project delivery system looks like, what things to look for, what things to watch out for, tips and tricks of the trade. eBuilder's been around since, I believe it's 1995. So we're approaching 28 years here. We've worked with a lot of customers, a lot of different capital programs, and we've learned some things that we would like to share with you. And then we're going to dive into the specifics of a value of digital project delivery for healthcare systems. Healthcare is unique in the fact that there's almost, I want to be careful about how I present or what verbiage I use, but there's a real higher outcome here, right? There's patients involved, there's physicians involved, there's the patient experience that is absolutely paramount. Not to get too dramatic, but the impact of delivering, high quality capital programs that result in, successful and top of the line facilities impacts real people, real lives, and ultimately serves, society's higher purpose of treating their citizens. So those are the first 3 areas we're going to cover. Number 4 is the Q&A session. Like I said, we are going to collect your questions as they come through. I'm already starting to see a couple come through, and we haven't even dove into the topic yet, which is great. So Q&A bar, in case you're just joining, I'm still seeing a couple people join in and trickle in here. You'll see the Q&A bar at the bottom of your Zoom chat. You should be able to insert your questions there, and we will collect them as we go throughout the webinar. And one other thing I wanted to highlight, actually, we're going to have several polls scattered throughout the webinar just to collect your feedback. And we're going to launch one actually momentarily here in a second. But with that said, let's dive into the pains pre-digital transformation. And Guillermo, I'll just pass this on to the next screen here. But you've been working in this industry for a while now. A lot of folks are still using paper and aren't using any systems in place today to serve their capital programs. Why don't you just tell me from the ground level, what are these pains? What do they look like? These are heavily complex and sophisticated capital programs. What does it look like? What does that experience look like without a system in place?
So thank you, Evan. So appreciate everyone joining us. And my understanding, Evan, that from what we've spoke before is that there's a group that might be looking at investing into a system, which, like you said, they're using paper, Excel spreadsheets and so on. And then there's other folks in the audience that are actually using eBuilder. So what I'm hoping to share with the group is my experience before we went digital. Like Evan mentioned, the pain points that happen that we're all experiencing and we've experienced for those who are already using eBuilder. And then also for the folks who are already using, and which also benefits the audience that's looking into a system, I'm going to share just a couple of examples that kind of reinforces the idea that, or confirms how we're using it over at BayCare. As a centralized project management information system. So I think everybody can relate to this, tracking project costs using Excel, relying on owner's accounting system. So typically what's my experience before in Mount Sinai Medical Center and at UT Southwestern when I was in Dallas, when I arrived at UT Southwestern, everything was being managed by Excel spreadsheets and things like that. And the accounting was, we were counting on someone from our group, from our team to reconcile with the accounting system to be able to keep track of what's going on with the project budget. So I think a lot of us have been there, and we felt the pain related to that, how accurate it is, how reliable it is. And a lot of times it's not very transparent. The other challenge that as far as not having a system, is the decentralized information, right? The contractor has his system for managing the project that he's using for PCs, for R5s. The architect is using his systems for files, for the drawings and so on. So one of the challenges over the years that I experience all the time is that the owner, who is managing usually the large capital projects, we're like serial builders that we're constantly building. We get invited to all these softwares, and the project manager gets invited. So project manager might be managing 5 or 10 projects. So the project manager gets invited to, sometimes 3 or 4 different systems. And it causes a lot of confusion for the owner. And the way I see it, when the owner's confused, it's not a good thing, because usually the contractor and the architect wants the owner to make quick decisions. From a project budget and status reporting, is very difficult. Like I said earlier, when I arrived at UT Southwestern, it was based on Excel spreadsheets. We implemented eBuilder at UT Southwestern. And over there, one of the things that we were still waiting to implement was the integration of the accounting system with eBuilder. When I arrived here at BayCare, I was very happy to see that they were already implemented eBuilder and was integrated, which is a huge benefit to everyone. Everybody reviewing and approving change orders is time consuming. So sometimes when sometimes with our project managers and other of my team's members, we talk about it. It's like we reflect and say, wow, how would we be doing this right now if we didn't have a system? Because I'll show you a couple of examples, but it's pretty much everything is there for us to review online, to approve. At all times, we know where every change order is, where every PC is, where every RFI is. And the thing that can really delay the project is not being able to make quick decisions in construction. As you know, time is money, right? And storage of project documents is in the non-digitized or a world before implementing a system, it's scattered, right? The architect has folders full of documents. He invites us to their drawings, and then the contractor has also filed, and then we have our own files. And then how is that organized? It's a little chaotic. Based on my experience, it was always kind of a challenge to manage that. I created this image to kind of illustrate what that means, right? Or what that looks like. So before implementing eBuilder, the architect has its digital system, the contractor has a digital system, then the architect has sub-consultants. As you know, the owner hires consultants ourselves, right? We hire commissioning agents, we have a scheduling consultant, we have an auditor, and then the owner has its own accounting system, right? And then the accounting system, in our case, we have Lawson. So there's that communication, constantly reporting. So what we get caught up with is the owner or the project management team that is managing all these projects for the owner is in the middle of all this data. And again, being asked to make decisions quick and trying to be transparent when all the information is in silos and relying on paper trails and Excel spreadsheets and so on. So that is what I realized, and I realized that in Mount Sinai, but I realized that also at UT Southwestern, and we decided and we looked at all different systems that were possible for us to manage our capital program. And what we dove into, we did select eBuilder, and the outcome of that is the image on the right. The owner, everybody gets invited to our system. Everybody is required to use our system to manage the projects when they're working for us. In that case, all the drawings are in our system, all the invoicing, all the submittals, everything. Everybody collaborates in our system versus the owner being invited to all the other system as far as being decentralized. Evan, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, this graphic is a perfect illustration. If you noticed, actually, a couple of minutes ago, we put up a quick poll on the screen in terms of what was your top capital program management challenge today. And I'm actually just pulling up the results of this poll right now. So it popped up, I think about 4 or 5 minutes ago, early on when Guillermo was speaking, and there were 6 different areas. So there was connected digital workflows, change orders and change directives, digital drawing and document storage challenges, integrated permitting and license, data integrity and reporting, and then ensuring stakeholders understand the value of eBuilder. So the results are kind of sporadic, but connected digital workflows are far and away the top response with the highest challenge level. So whose court is the ball in? You know, there's thousands of different stakeholders involved in some of these processes, and 35, almost 40% of you in the audience selected that as the biggest challenge. Guillermo, does that kind of align with what your expectation would be when when facing challenges in your capital program?
It does. And the digital workflow, I'm glad to see that digital workflows is out there, because sometimes you don't really appreciate that. At least looking back at my experience, one of my number one goals when I implemented eBuilder at UT Southwestern is get the budget and accounting kind of, being able to be accurate with what's going on with the project. And then when I started learning more about all the resources that the system can bring and all the workflows, then we were able to better understand the power, how powerful the system is to help us manage the project. So I'm glad to see that.
I said we would save Q&A for the end, but a really good question came in that I think we're going to jump in and ask you. So this comes from an anonymous attendee, and Guillermo, I'll obviously direct this towards you. Do you think that requiring all project partners to be on your eBuilder has benefited your workflows? Like, do you face pushback from adoption of the system? What does that look like from your side?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important is that if the owner is very committed, and this has to be supported by leadership of the organization and so on, this is how projects are managed in this organization. And if you are confident with this system, then usually we don't get pushback. We've never gotten pushback at BayCare. When I implemented this system at UT Southwestern, because we're in the process of implementing, it opens a door to, well, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, a little bit of pushback. But after that, after you work out the details and you're confident, you have to be very confident. You have to have the vision that this is the way to manage the project. Again, if the owner's confused, it's going to affect everybody. So what I believe, it's the contractor and the architect will realize that actually it's good for them, because the owner is more informed, better organized, and will be able to manage the project and respond quicker. Now, it doesn't mean that they cannot use their system. So, for example, the contractor will continue using their software to make their own changes with their subcontractors, and architect will probably have their own system for saving the documents, the drawings, and so on. But at the end of the day, it's what we care about is what's in our system and how do we have access to allow all those circles that you see there to collaborate in one system versus everybody inviting everybody to their own system.
I've got a little bit of a curveball question for you, Guillermo, because we've been talking about, or we've been, meeting with several accounts over the past couple of weeks, healthcare, university medical system type accounts. And I'm curious to know, either in your experience at BayCare or in university medical systems that you've worked at in the past, and maybe the answer is no to this question, so hence the curveball. But do physician expectations or physician demands in terms of the ultimate outcome, like the environment outcome, does that play a role in your capital program plans? Like, what sort of involvement do they have, if any?
The physicians don't. What the physicians care about is the finished product of whatever we're building. So that's the focus, the design and so on. This is all about being able to manage it within budget, within schedule, and to be on schedule, we have to be able to make decisions quick. Now, this is very important to, like, the COO the finance department, from being transparent, what's going on, who's managing the project. If there's some concern, or it looks like our department is confused, what is the budget and what are the project expenses, then it starts, there's, concerns and trust become an issue. So we want to avoid that. We want them to be very confident that we're managing the projects effectively, and that we're going to come in within budget. And if we don't come in within budget, we advise them in advance of what's going on, and go ahead and request funds, but in an organized way versus being a little chaotic after the fact. Worst case scenario, we ran out of money. We need to pay bills. We need to increase the budget because the contractor sent us a bill for $100,000 and we don't have any money. That would be chaotic and would cause concern in leadership's role.
Makes sense. So I love this screen. This slide is super helpful. We'll share this out after the fact. But let's move on to the second area of today's agenda, system selection. So why choosing eBuilder for your digital project delivery needs? I'll be super upfront about this. We live in a super saturated market with hundreds of different tools, with hundreds of different focuses. And, if you search up construction project management system, project management information system, or digital project delivery for construction on Google, you're going to literally find hundreds of different tools out there. And they all have different capabilities. They all have different functionality. But we'd love to talk to you about why we believe eBuilder is the best tool for your capital program. And Guillermo, I'll hand it off to you to share why your organizations have historically selected eBuilder to serve your capital program.
Sure. Thank you. So for those who haven't or are looking for a system, I'm glad you're here, because this is really good for you to be doing the research, listening into an owner as far as how they're using it. And I invite you also to reach out to other owners who are using different systems. Like Evan said, now than ever before, when I started looking for a system, I think it was in 2008, there was few. Now I think there's a lot of systems out there, and you have to be careful because it's a big investment. And it's very important for everybody to do their research and speak to different owners, look at live demonstrations as much as you can to feel comfortable. Based on my experience also, I was in different organizations where the facility management system was being used already for maintenance, and there was a push. Why do we need a different system? Why do we, and that's a huge challenge, because sometimes it's very difficult and our hands are tied, and explaining why it makes sense not to just tweak the maintenance system to manage capital. So it's really important to clearly understand what are the system's capabilities, and to get feedback from owners who are using the systems, and be careful that you just go into it's most convenient to purchase, because after you invest and after you commit to it, like right now, I get calls. Can you look at the system? We have the best system and so on. When you commit, that's it. We're integrated with the accounting system. For us to make a change, it has to be a dramatic issue that we would have to consider other changes. So think about that. And I'm glad you're here. And I recommend you also do listen to other owners who have different systems. But we're really, over the years, like I said, I implemented eBuilder at UT Southwestern. And fortunately for me, when I arrived here, I didn't have to convince anybody to use eBuilder. It was already being used. And like I said before, at UT Southwestern, my number one reason was that I was looking for is how do we get this accounting of the projects better organized? And everything else that kind of developed after that was really a bonus, and which has been now critical to the managing our projects. So accounting integration, very important. It needs to be able to integrate with the accounting system. We have Lawson, and over at UT Southwestern, we were looking at PeopleSoft. So we were waiting for PeopleSoft to be installed at the university. So we didn't integrate there. But what a difference. Oh my God, what a difference. Highly recommended. Just think about that. accounting, when, accounting is really important in a capital program and budgets and so on, but always look at also the ability of the system to integrate with your accounting system. Very, very important. Automated workflows, being able to process change orders and things like that is critical to the process. You don't want to just have an accounting system. You also want to be able to process change orders in a timely manner and be able to manage what's pending to be approved and so on. The data is not helpful if you don't have an ability to create reports. So very important. I had a system in Mount Sinai that we invested. It was a little bit more construction focused, and as at the beginning of the digital world kind of thing in construction or the owner's systems. And the first thing that after we implemented the system, I found out that you have to be a crystal writer to create a report. And I said, what is a crystal writer? And oh my God, it was very complicated where I had to go back to a consultant to be able to write crystal, and it wasn't easy at all. Even he struggled with it. So I have to say that reporting, being able to, for the owner to create their own reports, easily create their own reports is really important. At the same time, it's okay for us to count on other sources that are experts in reporting with eBuilder, that teamed up with eBuilder to go ahead and create reports. So change management, I talked about changes, the workflow, automated workflows, that's very important. There's a bidding module. We use the bidding module. Very important for you to consider that, because all our bids are submitted through eBuilder. It's very transparent. If we ever get audited of, what are the bids, how did you make a decision, is all there. And like in the images before, the document management is really important. Being able to have all the information in one place. And I struggle sometimes because we all do this. We save some stuff in our laptops. Then we have the shared drive. It's a slow process where people are, constant reminder. Remember, folks, if the information is important, it needs to be in the project or it needs to be in eBuilder. We've even created a place where we have all our standards, all our guidelines in eBuilder. So these are the things you should be looking for. I'm sure I'm probably missing a couple, but I think these are the most important that you should think about. And again, you're doing the right thing. If you don't have a system right now, I'm glad you're here, because it's really important for you to hear from an owner, because everybody has the best system when you speak to the salespersons. And this is really the way to do it, to listen to an owner, your peer, and be able to pick up the phone and call them up and be able to go through it together.
That's great, Guillermo. I'm going to actually double click into something you said in the beginning, and it stems from an open-ended question we just received here. Is what sort of benefit does the finance team receive with like a cash flow related workflow or accounting integration? Feel free to share any experience there.
Sure. So without the integration, the invoice would have to be sent physically or email or something to the accounting system. With the integration, the accounting department we free them up of that responsibility of reporting back to us. How's it going in the project, and how's that related to how our budgets are organized? So that's a huge benefit to them. Also transparency. They're transparent to our system. They can see what's going on in our system. And actually the finance team is part of they don't report directly to us. They actually are part of our team, but they report to the finance department, and they help us keep the balance, the check and balances in the system as far as accounting and so on. But the benefits are transparency. And also, if we're able to, the flow processes are efficient for our side, then also it helps them, because it's less that we have to approach them about where are we with this invoice, where are we with that invoice, and so on, as far as payments.
That's great. And a reminder, feel free to continue to insert your questions. We're still collecting them. We've got some stockpiled for the end here that we'll broach in just a couple of minutes. But let's move on to the digital transformation. Like, you've installed a system. What are the tips, tricks, like key focuses that you should be laser focused on after you've implemented a system? And I'll hand it over to you, Guillermo.
Sure. And what I'm sharing with you, just a couple of snapshots of images from my laptop. And I mentioned earlier automatic workflows. For example, this is my to-do list or overdue list. So as you can see now, the information is all organized. And this is really important, is how how do you know what is on your court to take care of? In this case, there's a PC, there's an invoice, and it also tells me if for some reason something has been sitting in somebody's court, it elevates it to my level to check in to see, why is it that this invoice is still pending and a project manager is holding it? So it gives me the opportunity to kind of, if I'm concerned, because one of the things we want to always do is make sure that we pay everybody on time as close as possible. We don't want to have the reputation in the community that we're late payers and this and that. So that's really important to us. So knowing where the invoices are, knowing where the PCs are is really important. So this is a good example of what is my to-do list and what you should be looking for, a system that allows you to see what's in your court to get done. Oops, sorry, I clicked too many times there. Automated workflows, change management, change orders. Again, here's an example. These are the PCs that are in the process of being reviewed and approved. As you can see, on the right column, financial analyst. Remember earlier I said financial analysts, our financial department is part of our team. They don't report directly to us. So the financial analyst is part of the PC process review. So that's another part where the accounting system, accounting department and so on is integrated with us, but they don't report directly to us. It clearly states at what step it is. So at all times, we know where all the PCs are, we know what's behind, what's due, and so on. Change, so automated workflows, cost control, right? We talked about cost control, change management, so on. I think we all relate to that. Oh my God, we have to add this one outlet. Oh my God, we have to move this one wall because we need more space for this office. We use change directives, which is an AI term that we've incorporated into, just kept on using it as far as AI contracts and so on. And a change directive is something that if we don't move ahead right away, it might cost us more or it might cost us a delay. For example, if the company is installing drywall and for some reason we need to add a couple of outlets or medical gas or something like that, and we realize this, there might not be enough time to do a PC and then a change order and all those things. So our typical AIA contracts have a thing called change directives, and we use that. And we've included in a process so that allows us to clearly document and make sure that we have a approval level. So I have certain levels of approvals, a certain amount of monies, and then my boss has higher amounts and so on, and senior PMs a certain amount. So this goes through that process. And if I don't have to approve it, it stops at the senior PM and so on. So just a quick example. And this is really important because cost control, we've been there where on a project that everybody thinks is the right thing to do. And everybody agrees that let's go ahead and move ahead with this $25,000 scope change. But then you have somebody else involved, I don't know, example me, and I ask, so tell me again, why are we doing this? And do we really have to? And all of a sudden everybody stops and thinks, you know what, actually we don't. And, and there's a change of thought. And that's happened a lot of times. And that's why the change directive is really important, because everybody's trying to do the right thing. And a lot of times the momentum of the project leads a contractor actually to move ahead with scope change. And there was a misunderstanding, and they go ahead and say, well, I thought you told me in a meeting that we should move ahead. It was a good idea. So that's what we're trying to avoid with. But again, workflow, automated workflow. It knows it goes from the contract to architect, from the architect to the project manager. If it's over a certain amount of money, it goes to me. If it's more than 500,000, it goes to my boss. So you can see how that's really helpful. Recently, we've implemented, again, we're leveraging the power of eBuilder and the systems, to how can it help us? I think a lot of us who are managing projects at hospitals can relate to work permits and hospitals. Above ceiling facility, in our case, has policies that whenever we're doing work in the facility that we need to pull a permit with them so they know what's going on, and make sure that whenever Joint Commission inspects that we have a clear process of how do we make sure that the rated walls are sealed and so on. So we've actually recently implemented a work process, an automated work process that allows us to, the contractor request a permit and also get the project manager, and we're trying it out at a facility where the facility actually approves it. In this case, you don't have to have a eBuilder license. We opened it up to facility is actually using it, because not everybody is a e-builder user. So in this case, we're able to come up with a process where someone can click on this PDF who may not be an e-builder user, let's say like a data drop that needs to be run in a hospital, and they can request a permit, and facility is managing those permits also themselves, which here's a program or system that is clearly to benefit the construction program, the capital program. And here we've teamed up with facilities to see how we can also use it with them to help them with challenges of all the permits, to avoid the binders of permits and papers and so on. Submittals, everybody's familiar. A lot of systems have this. So I think this is pretty well done in the system, in the industry, but be careful with workflows related, or systems that are originally designed for work orders and facility management to take on this responsibility if they haven't clearly shown it, or a lot of owners are using it successfully. So you want to see this work successful, because here is where the contractor, if this doesn't work right, and you tell them, and going back to your question, push back. If this doesn't work right, the contractor will tell you, this is not working, this is slowing me down, and we cannot use it. And that would definitely be a justified pushback that is hard to say no to, because you don't want to slow him down or her. There's automated workflows, and here's our workflow forms, which is a little bit different. These are forms that don't have to go to a different process, or don't have to go to an architect or so on. You can send it to anybody, but we're using these workflow forms to track issues. Like we have action items similar to an RFI, but it's coming from the owner. If we're concerned about something, RFI, scope change, we're tracking scope changes. Someone shows up and wants to relocate a wall because the office is too small. How do we track that scope change? Schedule delay. How does the contractor notify us of a schedule delay? The contract talks about what he needs to do, and it actually specifies you need to submit this if you're delayed. Warranty notices, closeout documents, building envelopes. Our building envelope commissioning agent uses a form to track all the issues there in eBuilder. And also substitution requests. We rarely use substitution requests, but it's there just in case the contractor recommends something different. Accounting integration. Evan, I just want to stop. Any thoughts, any questions, or anything that you want to throw in before I mention accounting integration?
I do actually have one question that came in from the audience, and that is, how do you handle, and this is technical, but I think it's worth asking, but how do you handle RFIs in eBuilder? Are you using the submittal module, or do you create an RFI process? Do you have architects or prime designers who prefer to use their own RFI process, and how do you approach that?
Yeah. So we don't use the submittal process. The submittal process is only for submittals. What we do use is a simple workflow form, and the architect, the contractor sends it to the architect, and they go back and forth. There's no other option. No one can use, and if the contractor behind the scenes wants to track his RFI with his subcontractor, that's up to him. The only thing we care is that the RFI is going to the architect through our system, and that's the most important. So that's how we manage it.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a couple of other questions, but we'll leave them for Q&A.
All right. All right. So here's an example integration of the accounting system. As you can see, our finance reviewer has this one here, is reviewing, and Lawson awaiting payment. See, all these have been integrated with Lawson, and they're just awaiting payment. So just a quick image to show you that the integration is there, and highly recommended. Think about when you're implementing a system, you're implementing it, but with the ultimate goal is to integrate it with your accounting system. Now, it's easier said than done. The finance group and the accounting group is very defensive or very protective of their system. So it's going to take leadership to also understand the value of integrating. And it may take leadership if they're not familiar with the power of implementing a system like that for their capital program. It may need them to visit, a peer like BayCare, or visit, us, or visit someone else. When I was in UT Southwestern, Nebraska, University of Nebraska visited us, and I think it worked out really well, where they saw how we used it, and the power behind it. I think they went in that direction, and I think they're happy users with it. And again, it's also being able to understand the power of the software and what is it you want to maximize the use. You don't really want to just limit it to only accounting. You really want to leverage all the system's ability of being able to manage the project, change orders, PCs, CCDs, and so on. Reporting and analytics. Remember when I said things to look for? In our case, the project managers update the projects. I'm just showing you a small section, but this is usually what they kind of update the information and it gives them the scope summary and so on, status and so on. And from there, we have created a report that says, and this information the project manager has entered, and it clearly states, here's, in this case, is Eddie Hewitt is one of our project manager. Here's his list of projects. And I think most of you also have the burden of estimating new projects, which has not been funded. And in our case, we have the same thing, which we're very glad to have a bunch of requests for estimates, because that's job security for us. But SPE is in progress. So we call it Strata Project Estimate. We use Strata to approving capital projects. But this is our list, or these are some of the projects that Eddie's working on and estimating. And this is the status of his estimates. And, if we got it approved by a certain time, this is projected from a cash, from a schedule wise and manpower load. So, but anyway, so here's a good example where we've actually leveraged the power of eBuilder and the software to tell us what's going on with Eddie's projects, approved projects, and tell us the status of what's going on with the estimates he's working on, which is not funded, which is just an estimate that he's working on. And the yellow and red is a bonus that we've actually added, because when it's yellow means that in 14 days it's due to update. Like, we ask everybody a minimum updated once a month. And then in this case, this one has fallen behind, way behind. So as you can see, it's like stands out, and that helps us just manage that part. Also from a manpower analytics, here's, as far as non-threshold and threshold and the estimates that the team is working on, it clearly states how many they're working on, the value of the projects they're working on, total project, and here's the estimate workload. And all these are rough estimates just to understand what size project they might be estimating and so on. So again, we're using this as a tool, as a quick picture. How's the workload? Who's managing what, and so on. And I mentioned earlier the permit. Here's just a good example. In the backfill renovation, there's all these utility shutdown permits have been requested by the contractor. The current status held by, and then the red means that the permit has expired. So one of the biggest challenges we've had over the years is a permit gets opened but never closed. And we have this long list of permits that are, then when you have a long list of permits, the report becomes useless because it's confusing. And again, we don't want the owner to be confused. So this helps us manage the permits. And then I think this is the last, but the folders all stored in eBuilder, and all the documents are there. And the bidding module, pretty straightforward, as you can see in this project. We didn't limit it to a contractor. We had the commissioning agent bid on it, building envelope bidding, our transition planning used the bidding module, artwork, furniture, and our relocation or warehousing was also part of it. Key achievements. So like I mentioned, centralized all project related information, discontinue relying on other systems for information, build trust by being transparent. This is open to finance. This is open to leadership. There's nothing to hide. Everything is there. Accelerate. It isn't an Excel spreadsheet in somebody's laptop. Accelerate productivity. The project managers now exactly know where everything is. Improved project team communication, collaboration, and we streamline workflows. And there's definitely a lot of opportunities coming up in the future, but those are key achievements that I feel very confident that has really helped us over the years manage projects and be efficient.
That's amazing. Guillermo, thank you so much for sharing that, visibility, insight into what you guys have done to, effectively serve your capital program. I did promise a couple of questions or time for questions at the end here. We've got some really solid ones. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a lengthy one. It's meaty, but it's good. And that is, do you have a prescriptive playbook, or maybe perspective? I can't tell which one they were using. I think it's prescriptive playbook or guide that provides instructions and expectations that contractors, subcontractors, architects, designers, and auditors can be provided so they understand the information and workflows that are required to provide and what information they can extract.
Sure. So we have two steps. One, we included in the RFP and in the contract that you must use eBuilder for all communication. We spell it. We have a eBuilder helped us create a kind of a guideline of what eBuilder shall be used for, and we include it in our contract. So when we do an RFP, we say, guys, these are the rules of the game. If you're interested, bid on the project. If you're not interested, we're okay with it. You can move on. So that's one. The second part is we do have a training program. As soon as the contractor is, a lot of times, and I think a lot of you probably, there's, you have the contractors that are bid on your jobs that if they don't get this job, they get another job, because we have so much construction going on that eventually they get a project and they become partners of ours. So if they're new, we do provide training, and we have teams that allow, be able to be available if they need any further training. There is a simple guideline, or there's a guideline that is provided as far as how to, but the training is really the key. It's a hands-on training, and that's how we do it, as a two-step process.
That's awesome. Makes total sense. So I've actually got a personal question for you, Guillermo. Have you tracked any sort of like measurable metrics in terms of success post implementation of eBuilder, whether it's like cycle time reduction or reduction in litigation claims, anything of that sort? Have you tracked?
No. The only thing I know that it was chaotic before, and now it's less chaotic, right? It's definitely much more organized. So it's hard because every project I've always tried, people talk about percentages of change orders, has it increased, decreased, and every project is different. So I've always struggled with trying to create a matrix that allows to track, even the project level, how successful it is. There's a different architect, there's a different engineer. The project could be simple, could be complicated, the conditions. So the only thing is just the reality. Sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes I stop, and Alan Money is our construction manager. Also, he helps. We work together, and we reflect and say, "My God, how would we be able to manage all these projects if we didn't have a system right now?" And the biggest challenge for you guys who are thinking of implementing is, I dealt with that, right? Managing capital program at the same time while you're implementing a system. That's scary by itself, but you got to do it. You have to have the vision that it's going to get better. And you just have to commit to it. And after you implement it, you'll see how it comes together. And being organized, even our project managers, like, thank God we have a system going on that we can rely on, because it just makes their lives easier. It's just, they're much more organized. They're able to see what's going on and so on. So I don't know if that answers the question, Evan, but.
No, it absolutely does. And I'd shout it out to the audience as well. We've got, many other eBuilder owners in customer accounts in the chat. Feel free to share any sort of like measurable metrics you have realized after implementing eBuilder. We know there's some floating out there, so that'd be super, super cool to hear. Another question that's interesting, totally different angle, and I'm paraphrasing here to protect the confidentiality, but they're saying, our organization has historically used a contractor system and it's just not working for us. How can I convince the rest of my peers in my organization to adopt an owner-centric system?
That's tough. If the organization has already committed to a system, the only way I could recommend is to have a conversation, meet with other peers that have different system, an e-builder system, and have the conversation, but it really has to come from leadership. If leadership, VPs and so on, don't understand it, and it's a really tough sell sometimes when it doesn't come from leadership. So leadership has to buy into it. Over at UT Southwestern, leadership was absolutely right away. It was like, yep, that makes sense. Let's move forward implementing the system. And it's cost. There's a cost associated with it, but it's so important to pick the right system. Now, if it's not working properly, then the only thing I could recommend is just have presentations where you can see the difference between one system and the other, and be able to list what are the things that you're not able to do with that system. So but that's a tough one. Again, there's the other challenge where the owner or the organization already is committed to a facility management system, and yeah, we're going to make the facility management system work fine for you. Don't worry about a thing. It's going to just work fine. And if leadership doesn't get it, it's a tough sell. It's very difficult. I've been there.
Well, hey, we're going to end on this question because I promised we would stay within our 45-minute time window, and I did not follow through on that commitment. But this is really good. This is really good content. So let's end on this. How do you deal with pushback from internal user adoption, or maybe not even pushback, but hesitancy to adopt a system? What strategies have you put in place to drive adoption of eBuilder internally?
Internally, well, maybe is the question, oh my God, why I'm a project manager, why do I have to use this? Is that maybe the pushback? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think you just have to sit down with the team. Look, again, don't use, when I implemented in UT Southwestern, it was very few owners. Everybody was starting to realize that the contractor had been using systems that it made sense, and it's time for us to use, the owner start using a system and forget, having to rely on other system and other. So you have to, there's the power that you have now is look around all the owners that are using a system that have committed to it and how productive they are. So you need to understand that if the data is scattered and the information is scattered, it's important for it to be, in one system and organized for us to be productive. And that's what you have to tell your project managers. This is the system we're going to use to manage it. If you don't use it, then maybe this is not the bus you need to be on. The in-house group has to buy in. There have been times when there's pushback, and actually the project manager likes the idea of confusion existing, some confusion being a good thing. It's like, well, I don't think so. You just have to set the rules. This is what our department's going to do. This is how we're going to go organize it, and we need your support. You can get on the bus or you can get off the bus. You have two options.
I love that quote, Guillermo, because there are a couple of comments that are in the chat right now that mimic exactly what you just said, and I want to quote them because they're so good and they're a little humorous to me. Golden rule: money talks, efficiency matters. Do it or don't get the job. That's one of them. You must use the system or an invoice won't get paid, and you want to get paid. So everybody after a while, everybody understands that's the way to do it. And like you said, like someone said, money talks. And again, if the owner's confused, I think everybody understands if this is a system that the owner uses to make sure he's not confused and can make quick decisions, it's going to benefit the architect, it's going to benefit the contractor, it's going to benefit everybody. Another quote came in that I cannot fully communicate live on a broadcast because it includes a swear word, but BS walks is basically the short version of it. So yeah. Let's conclude on that. Guillermo Ramos, Director of Facilities Design and Construction for BayCare Health of the Greater Tampa area. Thank you again so much for joining our webinar, sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise, sharing what you've learned serving your capital program and advancing, digital project delivery adoption. This is absolutely critical for healthcare programs, and we're really excited that you came on. One last note I will say is this was recorded. It will be available on the eBuilder website, and it will also be sent over or over email to your inboxes.
Thank you,
So
Evan, for inviting me. Really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing here at BayCare. So appreciate the time everybody spent.
absolutely. We love to have you. You're a familiar face. People love you. The audience loves you. And Guillermo, if you want to reach out to him, he will be available on LinkedIn. We will link it in the slide deck as we did before. So with that said, everybody enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you on the next one.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.